Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Fearing, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC.
This episode is brought to you by Spandice, an ice and heat therapy wrap for all your postpartum recovery and breastfeeding needs. Heat therapy is perfect for breast ailments such as engorgement and mastitis. Now you can have it in a comfortable wrap you can move around with. Check out the Spandice postpartum recovery wrap at spandice.com/badass. That's SPAND-ICE.com/badass. And you can find the link in our description.
Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, the lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder.
And we figured that we would tackle some news articles today.
Some big current events going on.
Yeah, and that's always fun. You know, there's always well, to us, I'm sure, breastfeeding's in the news every day. But to the average person, breastfeeding's never in the news. You know,
right.
Because, who pays attention to that? But
right. But it's getting some, it's broken out of our little circle this time.
Yes, it definitely has. It's heating up. And I imagine that this is what it was like probably 20, 30 years ago when breastfeeding really started to go back into play again, that it probably was hot like this. And if we had Google back then, or if we had that, the social media like we do now, it probably also would have blown up. But I think there's a lot people don't know about how breastfeeding has evolved and the struggles that breastfeeding has had to even just stay mainstream.
Yeah.
But
and how much there is beyond, you go on Facebook, it's I'm really involved in breastfeeding because I follow all these breastfeeding people on social media. But really, there's people who are active at the political level. There's, the country of the United States is involved, on, the highest level of the government.
Yeah.
So we don't really think about that because, again, you're saying it doesn't make the news all the time, but well, the current administration has made it into the news.
Yes, we have. So if you're not sure what we're talking about, because you might not be, but this is worldwide news for sure.
It is.
And I did find articles from all over the world about this. But the World Health Organization and all different countries were together, putting together, guidelines for infant and young child feeding. And it wasn't even just breastfeeding. It wasn't just all right, we're going to gather together to see what's happening with breastfeeding all over the world. It's more of infant and young child feeding, which means obesity, which means malnutrition, which means, all of that. Breastfeeding, all of this stuff gets covered during these things. Which is why it's covered by, so many different countries, because every country, everybody's got a different thing happening. And it's how can we support these children?
Yeah. So the goal is to help malnourished children become nourished, right? And, health problems that are, kind of prevalent in childhood, I guess. How do we solve those?
Anemia and, rickets and kids that don't have enough to eat, and childhood obesity where kids have too much to eat, all of those things that are happening in all different parts of the world. That's what this was about. And the bottom line, we won't get into a whole lot of technicality stuff, but the bottom line is that the organizations wanted specific verbiage in the guidelines stating that outside sources should not be able to come in and manipulate or lead people into a different direction, away from what is best for them. And our the United States representatives that were there, did not agree with that. And that's kind of always the way it's been. This is not new, but it's
right. So so a little bit of history, because we have the WHO code, right?
Right.
I mean, most of the world follows the WHO code. And what is the WHO code?
The WHO code is against. It's a code to kind of guideline the breast milk substitutes and whether or not companies can market those breast milk substitutes. And they have very strict guidelines and regulations on how they can advertise, how formula companies can advertise, who they should be targeting, where they're targeting this. Like, it's very, very specific because they have and this was the WHO code was like in the 90s, like the early 90s.
This is not new.
Yeah, this is not new. And every country that was involved in this signed off on it back in the 90s, except for the United States.
And everyone follows it. I mean, if you go to, I used to live in Holland. You don't turn on the TV and see like formula ads on TV. Like that's not allowed. Or they're only allowed to advertise like in certain ways, if at all. I don't even, I don't know the specifics of what the WHO code says, but obviously it is a guideline for companies and their advertising and their marketing. Right. Because what was happening, right? This came out of the formula companies were so heavily marketing and targeting, new moms. There are all these things, it's just as good as breast milk. They're making all of these claims that were, first of all, not based on any science really, and were interrupting breastfeeding.
Right.
So people were trying to breastfeed, and then they're getting all of this information like, oh, it's actually, and they're also saying like breastfeeding is not, your breast milk's not enough, and like all this stuff. It's not fatty enough. It's got iron in it. It's got vitamin D in it. All this stuff that your breast milk doesn't have. And so breastfeeding started to go on the massively decline.
Right. And they were giving, formula samples away at hospitals, like regularly. It didn't matter if you were a breastfeeding mother or a formula feeding mother. They gave you formula when you left the hospital.
You're saying it past tense, because I got a garbage bag full of formula as a breastfeeding mom leaving the hospital with my first. And that was just 7 years ago.
So that is something that still happened.
So again, the United States doesn't follow the WHO code, which is why it still happens here.
So it really, and there's a lot of hospitals that kind of took it upon themselves and say, okay, we're not doing this anymore. We're not giving away free formula anymore. We're not, if it's needed, okay, but we're not handing it out in droves like we used to. So because of that has dropped the formula industry quite a bit, because of those types of things, the different changes that we have adopted on our own as a country, not because of the WHO code, just things that we've, driven into. So we have the WHO code. Again, the United States doesn't follow that. They didn't want to be a part of it. And the reason that is because we are a country that is driven by corporations. And we didn't want, that would have hurt corporate sales of formula. Formula is a multi-billion dollar industry. Multi-billion. Billion. Is it not trillion? Because it's also like, they're all owned by like pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. Right. So, this is like a huge pyramid of like, money that goes up to the top. There's tons of power, and there's so much money. Now, one of the things also, going back even a little further, and this might be, I can't remember. I used to know the whole story. I can't remember now. There was formula companies, I want to say the 70s or the 80s, were pushing into third world countries. Oh, yeah. And bringing formula in, which then women would take this formula and use it, which would make their milk dry up. And then they would have formula, but they wouldn't have clean water. And they didn't have clean water. And people were dying. And it was still, this is still going on. Yep. And that was directly related. And like I said, this was so many years ago, but it was directly, and there was huge boycotts, and there was just like. Yeah, the Nestle boycott. Yeah. That's what that was, right? And that's what it was directly related to, was them pushing, or they'd bring in, what's it called? Formula that was expired. And hand it out and stuff. And it was just, it was so cruel. And these countries were paying for it. Yeah. They're paying money for this to the United States for this formula that was making them sick. And ultimately killing babies. Yeah. Babies died because of this.
Yeah. I mean, you can't mix formula with dirty water. You can't drink dirty water.
No. And they were getting sick and diarrhea and horrible diseases, and they would die. And they related it directly back to that. And I can't remember if like that was one of the things that kind of started the ball rolling.
I would imagine. Yeah.
But it was a big, big part of what was going on.
So we have this WHO code that came from this history that we're talking about. And so what was this assembly, like what were they, this assembly that happened just a couple days ago, I don't even know when it happened, when the actual meeting happened. But so what was this, like a renewal of it? Was it like
it's something
building
that they do
on
regularly.
It, or?
They do it regularly. And because they do like the guide, all sorts of guidelines. This meeting happened. This has been going on for a couple of months.
Okay.
Because you know how meetings, like you go and you word things and then you table it.
Yeah.
And look it over for another couple months and then you get back together.
Yeah, and this is global stuff. So, I mean, it's going to take a while. People are coming from all countries and
different resolutions that need to be adopted and everybody needs to agree. So it really started a couple of months ago. And it's a regular, it's a common thing that they do. In fact, I think it says here the 71st World Health Assembly, which was 21st to the 26th of May, has generated much controversy, especially around the latest infant and young child feeding resolution. So this is, the 71st. This has been going on a long time.
Yeah.
This is not new. Lots of countries involved on the first day of the assembly, sponsored by the Russian Federation, co-sponsored by Botswana, Canada, Gambia, Georgia, Ghana, Mozambique, Nepal, Pakistan, Panama, Russia, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Thailand, and Zambia. The draft resolution text was tabled for adoption, and the next day, USA proposed another draft that omitted a number of safeguards that were put in place to protect infant and young child feeding from commercial influences, such as implementation and monitoring of the code and relevant WHA resolutions, implementation of WHO guidance, and conflicts of interest. So basically, the U.S. was really trying to block that piece of things.
Yes, and the U.S., like we just said, the U.S. has there's such a tie between the corporations and the government in this country that the government is trying to, like we said, trying to protect the corporations. And so this wording is going to hurt corporations. And so we want to protect, I'm saying we as a country, we as people, I'm trying not to be associated with the decision. We're trying to make more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the expense of the infants and the children in this country.
Now, the articles that I have read on this throughout the last few days, and they've been from, like I said, all over the world. And of course, media likes to exacerbate things a little bit and cause a little bit of drama, but they around the world, they are really surprised that this is happening. They're just like, oh my God, like the U.S. is standing in the way of this progress for young children. It's kind
of silly too, because I don't understand. I guess because, first of all, how can you be surprised? I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I'm not surprised at this point that this is happening. I will say, because there's a little bit more to the story, right? I mean, there's more to the story is that it became heated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the discussion became very heated, and then the United States started making threats about pulling out like aid and assistance that was going to certain countries.
Mm-hmm.
To try to get people to agree with them,
right?
The delegates that were there. And so I guess that is, again, maybe some people aren't surprised by that. That's it's outrageous. It's completely outrageous. That happened.
It's kind of like somebody was quoted from the UK-based campaign Baby Milk Action. They were quoted as saying, "We are astonished, appalled, and also saddened. What happened was tantamount to blackmail, with the U.S. holding the world hostage and trying to overturn nearly 40 years of consensus on the best way to protect infant and young child health."
That's a killer quote right there.
It really is. It really is. Under an international code of the World Health Organization, baby formula companies are banned from explicitly targeting mothers and their health carers. Advertising is also controlled. And that's under the code, but we don't necessarily follow that here. Now, from the code also kind of came from the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative.
Yeah, right.
And that is where, if you're not aware of this, and this is something that I would love. Like when I did a talk for ILCA in Australia several years ago, and there were people there from obviously all over the world, but there was a woman that I was speaking to that was from New Zealand, and she said that every hospital was baby friendly in New Zealand. Which is amazing to me. And I know in Europe, there's a lot of baby-friendly like they tackled it, they got it done quick, and then they were working on how to get NICUs to be baby-friendly, which is a very difficult thing because obviously NICUs, that's a whole different world.
Yeah, right.
But here in the United States, we struggle with that. We struggle with that a lot.
I don't think people really truly understand how different it is here than in a lot of places in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I don't think that people who live here who kind of just say, like where formula is so normal, they don't understand that when you go to other countries, formula is not normal at all. It's almost never seen, and it's, it exists in cases of, emergency or whatever, but you just don't see it. And these countries make an effort to protect breastfeeding and to provide, obviously, it's not just, you can't just be like, everyone, you have to breastfeed because if you don't, you're a bad mom. Like that's not what's happening. They're pushing that, they push into hospitals. They have lactation consultants to help moms get started. Breastfeeding is also seen much more in those cultures too. And so it's more of a normal choice for a mom. And it's just, there's all of this support and there's all of this stuff that moms need to be successful. That doesn't exist here. And it doesn't exist here for corporate reasons. It's not just because people don't, that's not because nobody wants to be a lactation consultant or nobody wants to, or most people don't really want to breastfeed. That's not true. Like most people want to breastfeed, and most people are blatantly blocked by the norms that have happened here, which has become based on this marketing and the money that corporations have. I mean, hospitals get huge amounts of dollars from formula companies.
Oh my God. And that's the biggest reason why hospitals have a hard time becoming baby friendly. I mean, they have there's a whole
they lose funding.
Series of steps that you need to go to be qualified as baby friendly. And one of the steps is that you stop paying for baby formula, or that you have to you can't, or you have to start paying for baby formula. I should say, not stop paying for it. You have to start paying for it. So if you want to have it on hand in case. Yeah. Right, you can't accept it for free, which means hospitals now have to fork over money for baby formula for their nurseries if they feel like they need that as a safety net or whatever. And a lot of hospitals don't want to take that leap. Yeah. So sometimes they will do a lot of these steps, but they just will not take that leap into, okay, we're going to buy our own baby formula. There's some hospitals I know here in New York. Not in Rochester, but I believe in the city, they were trying to push for a while, and I don't know whatever happened with this. They were trying to push, if you were going to give out formula in the hospital, if you were going to say, okay, your baby's losing too much weight, or your baby hasn't eaten in several hours, or your baby's not latching well, let's give a little formula. They actually had to get a doctor's prescription for that.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. A lot of people say that formula should be by prescription.
And people were freaking out.
And I'm not saying it should or shouldn't. I'm just saying.
No, people were freaking out. And one of the things that the administration now has been quoted as saying on Twitter, because we know that's our best avenue for information.
Words from the president, yeah.
With this administration. But one of the things that was said was, we're not trying to go against breastfeeding. We want to make sure that mothers who want to formula feed have access to that. That's never been a problem. That
Right.
has never been a problem. So, and nobody wants, like, if you want a formula feed your baby, we've said this plenty of times on the podcast, there is a place for formula. There is. That's why it's
Absolutely.
there. It was created so that, you know, if moms that died at childbirth, adoption, you know, situations where moms legitimately don't make enough milk, like, or if you just need it to kind of get over the, whatever, that's why it's there. But it's not marketed like that.
Right.
It's not marketed like that. And that's where the problem lies. So here in this meeting, it was more about, like, they wanted to, the rest of the group, the rest of the countries wanted to make sure that that code still was standing and that the advertisers were not coming in and sabotaging that piece of it. And the United States said, no, we're okay with that. We're okay with that. We'll let you come in and take over. And that's not how it should be.
Right. How about a word from our sponsor? This episode is brought to you by Spandice, ice and heat therapy wraps you can reposition based on your specific postpartum recovery needs. Ice is perfect for C-section recovery, postpartum back pain, and much more. It also offers abdominal support too. What's not to love? Heal faster with the Spandice postpartum recovery wrap at spandice.com/badass. That's SPAND-ICE.com/badass, and you can find the link in our description.
You know, and I work in a doctor's office part-time. The amount of formula that we get for free is unbelievable. It's
and I heard, yeah, right? I mean, the amount of formula that I went home with was unbelievable. I mean, I went home with free formula, and people are thinking, like, well, if you're giving out all this formula for free, how are they making all this money? Because you get hooked. You know, now you're hooked on it. Your breastfeeding relationship has been destroyed, and that is how you're going to feed your baby from now on. But that's how they make all this money. The free stuff is nothing to them. That's pocket change.
Right. But if you give, if you give your baby a certain kind, if the hospital says, here, take this specific kind of formula, and that's the kind you use, most likely that's what you're going to buy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you
that's
end
exactly
up, like,
what we did. We bought that's the kind that we, Yeah. And we thought, we were just like, this is so awesome. This hospital is so cool. They gave us all this free stuff. It was a garbage bag, Diane. Like, it was one of those huge black garbage bags.
Oh my gosh.
And we went home with this thinking that we made out like bandits. You know, and then I'm struggling with breastfeeding I'm struggling like crazy. Duh. You know, I couldn't make it work. And I start doing all of this, you know, I start doing all the research. Everything's starting to become clear to me. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
What a trick.
So one of the other things it has done, and this might have happened to you too, I can't remember if it happened to me or not, but you go into a baby store or you go into a maternity clothing store and you put your name on a mailing list, you will start getting all sorts of free formula in the mail. Yes. Yeah, so that's another way that it's targeted.
They just sell your email address, and then here's your free samples.
So you get all sorts of stuff in the mail, and then it's in your house, and even if the hospital doesn't give you formula, or you go home, everything's fine, and then you start having trouble, or, let me feed the baby so you can sleep longer, whatever, there it is on the counter. Or in the cupboard because it was sent to you and that's where it is. And now but if it was never in the house to begin with, you wouldn't think about it.
Well, it's just like the epidural, right? I mean, I was in the hospital and I got to the point where I was like, I need the epidural. You know, I mean, there were a whole bunch of reasons why that happened. But when I was at home with my second, there was no epidural. There was nothing there. And so it was just... You just do it, you know, you're like, it's not there. Right. And so it seems like, oh, well, there's I would be in too much pain, but really, no, it's just not there. So you're not thinking about that. You're not like, oh God, I wish I had an epidural, because it's just not a part of the situation that you're in. Oh. I remember this too, because I remember with Jack when we started to I got in touch with a lactation consultant. I finally learned what that was. And she was like, just start titrating down the formula that you're using. And so we go down. Finally, we're off. And I had this little stash in the cupboard, and I was scared to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I thought, like, and my husband's like, why do we still have this? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, like, just in case. Like, what if just in case? And he's like, what? And I was like, what if I die? And he's like, then I'll go to the store and get formula. Like, you know, like, why do we, like, we don't need this right here. And it was such a, like, they had me.
Yeah.
They had me. Like, you're so reliant on it. You're so psychologically reliant on it.
And it's the way it's put out there. Like, I did have a mom very recently who said, I'm supplementing, but I'm supplementing with that formula that's specific for breastfeeding mothers. And I said, it's no different than anything else. You know, she's like,
no.
Oh, it's not like special because I'm like, no, it's the gimmick. That's what they put on there. So
that's
that breastfeeding mothers will
marketing.
think, oh, if I supplement with this formula, it's okay. And they actually do, like, some of the formulas that we receive at the pediatrician's office are in a cute little bag, and it'll say, here's a supplement and a gift for the breastfeeding mother.
Yep. Totally. And I don't know.
They target it totally towards the breastfeeding.
They do. Very aggressive marketing. And I don't know if this is, I can't remember where I heard this. I cannot remember where I heard it, but you would know because you work in a hospital. So I remember hearing about, like, because we're talking about, like, all of the financial incentives and stuff that hospitals get to push this formula. But I remember, like, hearing about somewhere, like even just the doctors, like, targeting the doctors with, like, steak dinners and, like, all of these, like, really super sketchy, like, behind the screen, whatever you could want to say, like, grooming, you know, like, like buying them things and.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Because they would want to talk to you about their new product. So they would take you out. And I remember when I first started at the hospital, and this was so long ago, but I worked there for like 5 years, and I haven't been there in like 5 years. So it was a long time ago. And they still I would see notes on, like, the staff room, you know, break room door that was saying, oh, you know, dinner on Wednesday night is being sponsored by this particular formula company to talk about their new, you know, product, if anybody wants to go.
And it would be like a super fancy dinner. Not like, you know, spaghetti from down the street, like, no. Really fancy.
So it got to be like, okay, then they stopped doing that. You know, they didn't stop doing it. I think the hospital just stopped allowing them in. Like, we did get that far where Rochester Hospital stopped being okay with that stuff, and they stopped you know, handing out formula at the hospital regularly. You know, they don't give it out at discharge like they used to, but they will give it if, you know, like in your situation.
If you want it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, nobody's saying, like, if a mom is like, I don't want to breastfeed, you go to a hospital and she's like, I don't want to breastfeed, and, you know, whatever, this is a long conversation, and you're forced to breastfeed and nobody will give you formula. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. That doesn't
you know,
happen.
No, it doesn't happen. Like, people can choose to use formula. We're not saying that you can't choose to use it. We're saying these companies need to stop with the aggressive marketing that is purposely and intentionally destroying breastfeeding relationships right at the beginning.
And that's really what it comes down to. You know, it really comes, we're not saying, like, this is horrible, you should never ever touch it. It's more like, it should not be marketed to you.
No.
Like, that it's the same, that it's not harmful, that it's
right, and you have to,
you know, okay.
Right, you have to have that information. You have to understand that if you're not going to breastfeed, there are consequences. You know, like, if you use formula, your baby's, you know, like, is your baby going to be fine? Like, yeah, people are brought up on formula. Like, we know that we get that, you know, but you know, there's all of this research where we're talking about these people who meet at this assembly. They have all of this research. They have all of this science from researchers and from all the experts that say, here's all these childhood illnesses. Here's all these things that are going on. What's the best way to tackle it? Well, breastfeeding. You know, getting breastfed from the start is the best way to start. Is, you know, for these long term, like, healthiest long goals for kids. Right. Yeah.
It is one thing here. One of these articles that I'm reading, it says a plethora of studies have shown the stark health improvements brought about by breastfeeding in the U.S. and around the world. A Harvard study in 2016, which is not that long ago, estimated that 3,340 premature deaths a year among both mothers and babies could be prevented in the U.S. alone, given adequate breastfeeding.
Wow.
I mean, there's been a lot of pushes out of even the World Health Organization, like during World Breastfeeding Week and stuff like that, saying like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of babies can be saved.
Yeah. And this is not me on my blog. This is not, an overzealous like person on social media. These are researchers. These are scientists that are doing these studies for not for your entertainment, for policy, to create the healthiest situation we can for children and for infants and children.
Now, I worked for WIC for a while too, and all my jobs kind of overlapped each other. Sounds like I've worked in a zillion places, but I did more than one at a time. But I worked for WIC for a while as, breastfeeding support, because there was WIC had a lot of funding, and it sounds contraindicated because WIC is a supplemental food program that gives out formula. And that is for, moms who need it, poverty, things like that. It's a supplemental program. It's not intended to completely fuel your child for a year, but it will supplement if you need help purchasing your food. And then they also got state funding or federal funding to start these great breastfeeding programs so that moms could start, moms that were breastfeeding could get access to support. If they chose to not get the free formula with WIC and breastfeed, they would have, peer counselors to answer questions for them. They would get a bigger food package to support them. Like it was great. And people thought that, if WIC is giving out this specific formula, that must be the better formula because that's what WIC gives out. And I was like, I remember telling somebody, I was like, no, that's who won the bid. Like that has nothing to do with, this is why the hospital gives it out, because this is a number one fantastic, like the stuff we give out in the doctor's office, it's because we have a ton of it. It's not because it's the best, or it's because it's, this is the best formula. No, it's because what you have the most of, or what you get the cheaper bid of these huge organizations that are, paying for it. Who's getting the better deal? Oh, this company. So that's the one we give out. There is no it's a very, very confusing place to be if you don't do your research and you don't understand how it all works. Because there is a lot of talk out there still, even from medical providers, that, the way they make formula now, it's just as good as breast milk. It's fine. They can't prove that it's not okay. It's really, all that same stuff is in the formula that's in the breast milk. And, if you want to supplement, it's not going to hurt. It's fine. Don't worry about it. You don't need to breastfeed. And that's fine if that's your choice. But if you are a mom who's struggling and you really want to breastfeed, that's damaging.
Yeah. Right.
And I mean, we get stories all the time from moms that tell the same story like you. They really wanted to breastfeed. They struggled. They were given lots of formula. And they felt like they were unsupported.
Yeah, because there's all these things. You're in this culture that's you're going against the grain. Mm-hmm. You're completely going against the grain, and it's not comfortable for most people. It's not comfortable for anybody.
No. And you want to do the best thing for your baby.
Yeah.
So basically, bottom line, I know we're kind of on a soapbox.
So what was the outcome? So what happened?
Oh.
So did the U.S. just decided not to sign once again? Not on board?
Russia swooped in.
Right.
And kind of made it, eased it all over. And they still kind of made it so that everybody has their way, from what it sounded like. Mm-hmm. But I don't know the exact verbiage of what
was agreed on. Yeah.
I'm looking.
I don't imagine anything will be changing in the United States anytime soon based on this.
Right.
We will still not be following the code or any of that.
Right. And that's, I did want people to realize that it's because I think if I were a new mom right now and saw this, I'd be like, oh my God. But I think people should know that this is an ongoing thing. This is not the first time this has happened.
No, not at all. Yeah, right. It's totally all the time.
And, but the minute I saw it, you know, of course I sent it to you, but my first thing is like, oh my God, like this is so, we've come so far. And now it's like, you're just reverting back again.
I know.
We've come so far.
It's really, really hard not to feel how easy it is to ruin progress. Right. You know, it's like, wow, that's all it takes. And all it takes is like a couple meetings, couple signatures, and things can be complete, you know, progress can be completely reversed. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really hard to stay positive sometimes.
It
and that's why we will probably always have a job.
And you know, and it's important because we need to have the advocates. And I think what you said earlier too was really important about like, you know, you don't realize that people are in this position advocating. And I didn't realize until I got into this place that like there's people in New York that I know that are out there lobbying for maternity care and home births.
Right.
And like there's tons of things that we want change for.
Right.
And you have to have a voice, you know, you have to be out there and making your voice heard. So,
and you all can go back to the Becoming a Breastfeeding Advocate episode and be inspired to be a part of it.
Oh my gosh,
and what we didn't talk about during the Breastfeeding Advocate episode was getting involved in politics, running for office in your local area, like, you know, those things. And voting.
Yes.
Vote. Everybody vote. I'm not even telling you who to vote for. I'm telling you to get up and vote.
Make your voice heard.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's us today. So go out there and advocate.
Yeah, and then leave us a review, please. That helps us out.
Yes. So after you vote, go leave a review.
You probably can't vote today, but
maybe not. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.